Alright, y'all, it is time for the Bahrain Grand Prix Observations 2023 edition. I never made a 2022 edition of the Bahrain Grand Prix Observations because I wasn't even posting videos yet. But anyway, the new season is underway. Some surprises, some non-surprises. And while some people are in trouble, some man in this observations are going to be in trouble. But anyway, let's get into it. Let us get into it. We're going to start with Red Bull. Maximilian Verstappen has, of course, romped away to a victory here in Bahrain. I mean, look, he's going to walk the championship. He's absolutely going to. He's going to be challenged at some points by Perez here and there. Well, there's really only like 2 or 3 circuits that I might bank on Perez. But he'll be challenged here and there. Hopefully by Ferrari. Hopefully by Alonso in the Aston Martin. But all that aside, Red Bull, at the start of the season, they're in a far better position than they were last season. Far better. And it's not even about how fast their car is relative to their own car that they came with last season, or even how reliable it is relative to that car. It's not even about this. It's about how fast and reliable it is relative to, well, the rest of the field. And they're miles away. They're miles ahead. They are miles ahead. You know, it's crazy. The commentary team is convinced, and I'm going to agree with them on this, quite frankly. Commentary team is convinced that Maximilian Verstappen, he wasn't even pushing for this Bahrain Grand Prix win. Yeah, I fully agree with them. He wasn't giving it any real beans. He was just keeping it as composed as possible. It's just a Sunday drive. It was a Sunday drive for him. Right. The only point of interest around Red Bull for me is the 1 and 2 driver gap that Maximilian Verstappen and Perez displayed. Well, that Verstappen displayed to Perez, I should say, just cleanly, right? Because if Perez was wondering why Red Bull don't regard him as the number 1, or even as or why they don't even regard them as equal drivers, they don't give them equal driver status. Well, you know, all the film from that Bahrain Grand Prix, didn't even get film at the front of the Grand Prix because Maximilian was just on his own. Perez couldn't hold on to him. He absolutely couldn't hold on to him. So, you know, that's your 1 and 2 driver gap right there. And it's a big one. That was some 12 seconds last I checked in that race. Last I checked the gap. It was a 12-second gap. Maximilian is cruising. Perez is, well, he's probably doing his tire management, of course, as Perez is always doing that. But he can't keep up with this guy. It's no secret. Now, I've said Red Bull are in a better position than they were last season. Someone's going to say, oh, but they've got the whole, they've got to deal with their whole financial punishments and their competitive punishments and their sporting punishments for their financial breach. I mean, look, they've got the car already. The car is so far ahead. How much development do they actually have to do on this car through the season? Not that much. I'm assuming that everyone behind them is not actually going to be able to pull some sort of budget flex on them. Right, but how much development do Red Bull actually have to do? Not that much. It's not that much. What is Maximilian complaining about at the end of the Grand Prix? Oh, the rear tires kept locking up. It was pretty annoying. That's the complaint? You know, most most drivers wouldn't even bother like telling the TV that. Although I suppose it was picked up on the radio and they aired that piece of radio to the public, so of course the media are gonna ask him about it. But I mean that's the main critique on the car, that the rear tires, they lock up a bit too much. Come on now. You can solve that out on circuit with the brake bias. Like, come on now. This car is so far ahead. And I don't mind that the car is far ahead, right? I don't even mind that Maximilian Verstappen is gonna like waltz to a championship. But the optics are pretty strange after this whole financial breach and what have you, and the punishment that they got handed out from there. The optics are pretty strange. We'll just have to see how this plays out over the season and whether or not Red Bull actually encounters some issues with budget. Right, that's really all there is to do. Because they're not going to get pressured by, well, they will probably be pressured by Aston Martin at some or another Grand Prix, by Alonso specifically in the Aston Martin. It's not going to be Stroll, is it? It's not going to be Stroll, is it? But yeah, barring that, I don't actually see Ferrari mounting a real challenge, and I don't. Mercedes, I'll get to Mercedes in a second, and Aston Martin, as much as I might like a title fight between Alonso and Verstappen to happen, I just don't really see it happening. I can see Alonso winning some Grand Prix, I can see him battling with Maximilian for the same piece of road at some circuits, but the challenge for championship against this car? No, it's just not happening. But oh well, we can only wait and see what exactly happens with Red Bull as the season goes on. And then the season after, it's, Red Bull are back to their full powers. But anyway. Anyway, I would put money on Perez again at Monaco and Singapore. Which other circuit might I put money on Perez? Saudi Arabia, but he would have to bring some real heat. But we'll see if he actually does that. Anyway. Onto Aston Martin, and Aston Martin are scaring they're scaring the bejeebus. They're scaring the ever-loving bejesus out of Mercedes and Ferrari. Let me tell you that. And let me be frank about it. Right, and what's the scariest part about Aston Martin? That Alonso, he's got his smile back. That's the scariest part. That's no TV smile. That's, oh my God, I can't believe we're back up here smile. That smile is, that's the type of smile that that's the type of smile that lets the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari know that it's no fluke what they're doing here at Bahrain. And now let's actually talk about Aston Martin and their car. Is it a trace job? No, it is not a trace job. Last year's car, well, the upgrade package, quote-unquote upgrade package, that they brought for Spain, that was a trace job. A blatant trace job. Now they learned what they learned from their attempt at tracing. And now they've brought their own concept to circuit. And boy is it good. Boy is it fucking good. And how do I know it's not a trace job? And how do I know they're not copying anyone else on the grid? I know this because looking at the side pods of this Aston Martin, they've got a different type of scoop / dip on their side pods, and I haven't been able to get a good shot of it yet. I mean, it will come in time. Maybe I'll even find a picture for this video. But I haven't been able to find a good shot of it over the weekend, well, with the footage that we were provided over the weekend. But you can see on the footage that there's a part of that side pod that dips. It dips. It's like a 20 centimeter, maybe 30 centimeter gap on the side pods, and it dips. I'm not quite sure how far on the body it dips. It might go down to the floor, it might not go down to the floor. But that's what Racing Martin now have on there. That's the most notable part of their car that I saw. Alright, there might be some other notable parts, but I can't call it a trace job. I can't call them Racing Martin. I have to call them Aston Martin now. Alright, so, just regarding the car, I can't call it a trace job this season because they've got concepts on that car that are unique to them. No one else on the grid has their scooped out side pod. Red Bull have no scoops on their side pod. The top of their side pod is just smooth, which was super fascinating, right? You've got Mercedes trying to reinvent the wheel with their side pods. You've got Ferrari having their scooped out guild side pods and all of that. And now you've got Aston Martin with, well, their mini scoop, their mini scoop on the side pods. It's a dip on the side pods, what have you. It's a very big dip on the side pods, but it's a narrow dip on the side pods. It's very interesting. Very interesting little piece of tech that they've put on this car. So that's the car. It's not a trace job. They've got something very unique on the car. They've got something that the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari might even want to copy if they decide to ditch their side pod concepts. Right, but anyway, now that Aston Martin have legitimized themselves and Alonso is back with his smile, and I have to explain why I want Alonso to either challenge for a title or perhaps even win it. Why do I want Alonso to challenge for a title? People are going to say, oh, that's blasphemous. You can't say that if you're so... Well, I'm saying it. Why am I saying that? Because Alonso is in his 40s, and I think it would be good optics for the likes of Sir Lewis Hamilton to see Alonso just challenge for a championship. He doesn't even have to win it. But to just see him challenge, that would crystallize it in Sir Lewis Hamilton's head that, oh, I can really do this thing till I'm 45. Right? That would crystallize it. Right now, it's still a theory, if you want to call it a theory. It's still some sort of theory that he could race till he's 45 if he wants to. Still be challenging for championships at that age. But if Alonso actually produces the film this season, and he's got the talent, he's got the talent, and his body is still working with him to actually do it. So if Alonso produces the film this season, that's it. It's crystallized in Mercedes HQ heads, in everyone's heads really. But at Mercedes HQ, it'll be crystallized for them. Oh, we really have this guy till he's 45. So Lewis Hamilton is crystallized. Oh, I can really challenge for championships past 40. The rest of the grid, oh damn, we got to deal with this Sir Lewis Hamilton guy for a few more years still. But that's really all riding on whether or not Alonso actually puts up a challenge or not. I expect Alonso to win some Grand Prix this season, definitely. How many, I don't know, maybe 2, maybe 3. But perhaps Trace and Martin really smash it out the park with their... Are upgrades coming for Spain or Baku this season? Because the whole calendar has been mushed up. The whole calendar been mushed up. They moved Spain forward. I'm assuming that they've moved Spain forward because the testing period, the formal testing period in the off season, winter testing, was so short. I've never seen 1 weekend of testing and you're going racing. I've never seen that. So, in my mind, they're bringing Spain forward on the calendar to facilitate another test over there. And well, will any teams have upgrades ready to go? Probably. Nothing major, probably. Mercedes are talking about Baku right now. About that. About that. I don't know why you would want to bring upgrades to Baku. Right, type of circuit that is. But anyway, I want Alonso to challenge simply to crystallize in all VIP's heads for this topic. Your Sir Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes HQ, and a few drivers on the grid like Max Miller and Verstappen, that Sir Lewis Hamilton can really do this thing long into his 40s. Right, that's why I want Alonso to challenge. Now, let me talk about Stroll. Alright, Stroll was driving one-handed. This is the one that really, this one jumped out to me, quite frankly. Right, do I mind that Stroll is driving one-handed? No. We're in an era that's post Robert Kubica and his second career, where he was essentially driving one-handed. We're post that. Right. Kubica got the race seat. He got to do the victory lap of, I made it back to F1 with one arm now. He got to do all of that, and there wasn't really any kerfuffle about the fact that this guy is essentially driving with one hand. Right, there was no kerfuffle about that. It's alright. Stroll, he's essentially driven one-handed here. I think the bigger injury, I mean, you could see Stroll's wrist giving him a mare when the Aston Martins collided, for instance, on the first minor collision. That was very lucky for them. That's another thing. They're very lucky, this Aston Martin team. How that incident didn't end in some very angry expletives on the radio, we will never know. Mind you, the cars are just being built harder and harder as the years go by. It's quite interesting. The wings are nowhere near as flimsy as they used to be when I first started watching F1. Right? They're nowhere near. I can take a beating nowadays, which is bizarre. But anyway. Stroll driving one-handed. You could see his wrists giving him problems. I think the bigger injury was that he also broke his big toe in his right foot. If he had broken the toe in his big toe in his left foot, I don't think he would have been able to drive, because he would have to. How would he use the brakes consistently? Right, and these brakes, not like your civilian car brakes or anything. Anyone who's ever touched like racing brakes before knows, right? Them things are heavy. That pedal is fucking heavy, right? So if it was Stroll's left big toe that he had broken with the cycling incident, I think Drogovic would have raced. There wouldn't have been enough painkillers they could have put this guy on for him to make braking comfortable. Right, for him to even make braking doable. If he had broken his big toe in his left foot, it would be a whole different scenario. So that would have been a far bigger issue than Stroll driving one-handed. Anyway, he'll heal as the season goes on, and yeah, that will be that. But Stroll, he got ahead of the second Mercedes of George Russell. That's alarm bells, because he's driving one-handed. That wasn't Stroll at his maximum. You saw Alonso at his maximum. He drove away eventually at some point. As soon as the fuel levels came down just a bit, Alonso started rumping away. That Aston Martin looks dangerous. At least it looks dangerous for the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. It might be dangerous intermittently for Red Bull, but it's not really dangerous. Then they're gonna win every other circuit. But Stroll getting ahead of George Russell? Oh, hold on now. That's trouble. That's alarm bells at Mercedes. Because when Stroll has two hands, when he's healed, right? When Stroll is healed, he's going to be racing against Sir Lewis Hamilton in that car. Stroll is going to be racing with Sir Lewis Hamilton a lot more often this season, and there's going to be some jarring optics, but oh well. We'll get through it somehow. We'll get through it somehow. But yeah, Stroll driving one-handed and finishing ahead of George Russell. You know, if there was any like one set of optics to really perk Aston Martin up in terms of what's in store for them this season, that's it. That's the one right there. Never mind what Alonso's done getting a podium, right? Big congrats to Alonso and Aston Martin for all of that. Never mind that, and the pace that they've maintained from testing through to the race. Never mind all of that, right? But yeah, for Stroll to get ahead of the Mercedes, and he's not even 100% fit, break glass in case of emergency, you know. You know how it goes. Anyway. Okay, addressing Ferrari. Ferrari are carrying the same ailments that they had midway through last season. And so they've got a new boss with the same problems. There is probably a train of thought where we do have to give Fred Vasseur a season, maybe 2 seasons, to implement his Ferrari, as it were. Right, all they did was develop last year's car, progress last year's car a bit. Never mind whatever shortcomings that concept had. They've progressed it because, well, you get a new team principal in, and unless the technical director already knows what the brand new concept's going to be, you're really just going to be tasked with developing the old one. And so they've done so. they will have to prove this season that their car can even be developed further. I don't think it can be all that much. And well, jury's out on Ferrari. There will be some Grand Prix where they challenge the Red Bulls, but I don't see them actually beating the Red Bulls. Right? Something would have to happen with the Red Bulls. Right? Of course, it's F1, anything can happen, but something would have to happen with like a puncture on Verstappen's car. Something would have to happen. And I don't even see Maximilian Verstappen like picking up a puncture. You know, he's gonna be too far away from any melee that happens going into the. You see, this is the way it's set up this season. This is the way it's set up. Ferrari carry the same ailments, a new boss, same problems. They were only given the option of progressing last season's car, and now the new boss needs a bedding in period. I agree with Martin Brundle, right? Martin Brundle said a thing, and he said that Ferrari is so huge an organization that they should have kept Binotto, brought in Vasseur, and moved Binotto to the engine department exclusively. That's another thing I said last year. That was an option Ferrari could have made. I'm not sure. Maybe Binotto said no, he's not doing that. He rejected that. Most likely. But yeah, I agree with Brundle when he says Ferrari needs to be run by more than one person. You get Vasseur, Binotto, and two other men them in there, and you make it work. You make it work. That's Ferrari. That's a huge brand, huge organization, lots of pressure. You need a lot of heads working up. Mind you, Red Bull essentially have three bosses, or three team principals. They're all responsible for different sections of the team, and that would be Horner, Dr. Marco, and Adrian Newey, right? They're all responsible for their own separate part of the team. Right, Red Bull, it's so funny, they're running the prime Ferrari setup. They're running that prime Schumacher, Braun, John Todt set. They're running that. But Ferrari can't run that for whatever reason. Anyway. Two things to note about Ferrari. They've got a number 1 and number 2 driver gap, just like Red Bull. This is what Dr. Marco was talking about last season. How do I know that? Well, because Leclerc was romping away from Sainz. Romping away. Sainz had no chance, no hope of making any sort of impact on Leclerc. Leclerc, he was desperately trying to catch the Red Bulls. He was driving the car at the maximum. Probably past the maximum, hence it broke. But he was driving the car at the maximum the whole way. Sainz, he might have been a bit more conservative, expecting the car to brake on him or something. But still, number 1 and 2 driver gaps right there. I didn't hear any radio messages coming from the pit wall to Leclerc to tell him to slow down, so I can only assume that the engine went poof completely out of the blue and they weren't expecting it. But yeah, new boss, same problems. One other interesting thing to note at Ferrari, they are trialing the Mercedes concept of front wing that Mercedes trialed, and it was eventually outlawed at Circuit of the Americas last season. It's legal for this season, allegedly. That front wing that's got the what do I call them? That's got the struts on it. Right? Do I call them struts? I'll call them. It'll come with a picture anyway. But that front wing, that concept of front wing, is allegedly legal for this season. So I would like to see if Mercedes are going to do anything with that. But otherwise, for Ferrari, this season looks like, dare I say it, another learning season. Dare I say it. Unless they bring some killer upgrade package. But, for me, this is just for me exclusively, I need to see these cars with the super exotic side part concepts, your Ferraris and your Mercedes. I need to see that these things can actually be developed, that they've actually got a development ceiling that is higher than I'm expecting it to be, because I expect them to be capped out on development sometime soon. Right? They can prove me wrong on that very easily. Very easily. But considering the amount of progress that Red Bull made in the off-season with limited budget, and how they've pulled away from Mercedes and Ferrari. Mercedes, by the way, we'll get to Mercedes, but Mercedes, Toto Wolff said himself that they hit all their targets in the off-season. So they've had a perfect off-season by Toto's words. And this is the gap coming out of the off-season, coming out of winter testing. Right, this is the gap. But anyway, I need Ferrari to show me that their car actually has a higher ceiling to it than what I'm seeing. I need them to show me that. And I'm not expecting them to be able to deliver on that because, well, the physics is what the physics is. It just is the way it is, right? But anyway, I posted this image on the community tab. I don't expect it to get much traction. I'm not entirely fussed one way or the other. But I posted Toto Wolff's quotable on the community tab, right? So let's go through it, because now we have to address Mercedes. Oh boy. Toto has given the media a very juicy quotable. I'm going to read it out here. And he dropped this quotable right after qualifying. Why does it matter that he dropped it after qualifying? Because, well, that's when the cars are being driven at their, no one is sandbagging in qualifying. All this chatter about Mercedes sandbagging in testing, goddamn. Don't you just wish? I never expected it to be real. But no one's sandbagging in qualifying. Never ever. And the Mercedes drivers, the Mercedes pair, Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, they're some of the best qualifiers on the grid. I actually have George Russell as the best qualifier on the grid. If you were to put all the drivers in the same car, make it a Minardi if you must. Right, you put all the drivers, all 20 of them in the same car, and George Russell is probably gonna qualify on pole for that weekend, put them in a spec series. So it's really alarming for Mercedes when they've got two of the best qualifiers on the grid. Right, you could increase that list to 4 or 5, and Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell are gonna be in your top 5 or top 4 of best qualifiers on the F1 grid, right? So when some of the best qualifiers on the F1 grid are 6/10ths down, it's peak, it's long. And Toto knows this. Toto knows this, right? Seeing is believing. This could have been Seeing is Believing episode 2. Right, but there's no need. There's no need for such. But let's get into what Toto done said here. Alright, so Toto said, and I quote, "I don't think that this package is going to be competitive eventually. We gave it our best go over the winter, and now we all just need to regroup, sit down with the engineers, be totally non-dogmatic, and ask what is the development direction we want to pursue in order to be able to win races. We hit our targets, that's why I say we gave it our best shot. But the moment comes when the stopwatch comes out, and that showed us that we are not good enough. At this team, we blame the problem, not the person. I have responsibilities. I need to fire myself up if I want to do something. We got it wrong last year. We thought we could fix it by sticking to the concept of car, but it didn't work out. So we just need to switch our focus onto what we believe is the right direction." Now let's oh boy, Toto said a whole lot here. Let's get into it. So he starts off with saying he doesn't think the package is going to be competitive eventually. That means this car is never going to be what they thought it was going to be. This concept is never going to be what they thought it was going to be. Right? I don't think that this package is going to be competitive eventually. He's not even deeming the current package competitive, which is like crazy to me, right? Which is crazy. Mind you, there's a whole lot of teams on the grid that would kill to be in Mercedes' position, guaranteed somewhere in the top 10. They'd kill for that. But that's not what Mercedes are about. Competitive for Mercedes is you're able to win races, and Toto doesn't think this concept is ever going to do it. Eventually, he said, it's never going to do it. He then says we gave it our best shot, we gave it our best go over the winter, and now we all just need to regroup, sit down with the engineers, be totally non-dogmatic. This thing where he says non-dogmatic, right? What does that mean? I need people on the ground to know what this means. This means that Mercedes have been running it in their heads that the zero pods is correct, right? They discarded all concepts that were not the zero pod. So if the engineer comes, if the engineer, the aerodynamicist, what have you, comes in and says, well, I came up with this concept over here, but it's not zero pods, but the data on it is insane. They threw that away. They threw that away because they were being dogmatic. That's not zero pods. Go figure out the zero pods. Right? That's what he means by saying they got to be totally non-dogmatic and ask what is the development direction that they need to pursue to win races. That's what he's saying over there. Now, I can't believe Mercedes HQ have been running it where they've been discarding all concepts that are not the zero pods. I can't believe they've been doing that. Toto said it himself, so that is what they've been doing, but I still can't believe they've been doing that. It's so irresponsible. It is so irresponsible, right? At some point, lads, I'm gonna have to check if there's a wound under the bandage, rip that shit off, and they might be sabotaging Sir Lewis Hamilton right here. It might be time to get there. I'm gonna give Mercedes some time still, but it might be time to really consider this. Toto then said they hit their targets. That's why he said they gave it their best shot. Mercedes had a perfect off-season. By their own metrics, they had a perfect off-season. They had a perfect winter. They had everything, all the metrics that they needed to meet were met. And look at that, when the stopwatch was brought out on Saturday, whew! Oh boy, Toto had to come out with a statement immediately, right? And it's so important that it was in qualifying, and specifically with Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell in the cars, right? I need people to understand this about some of the best qualifiers on the grid. Your Sir Lewis Hamilton, your George Russell, your Max Verstappen, right? Your Fernando Alonso's, right? When these guys qualify the car, they are driving the car above its maximum performance delta. They are driving it at 101 or 102% of its maximum. They've broken the limit of the car. That's how they qualify. So when the likes of Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, by the way, best qualifier on the grid. Why do I say he's best qualifier on the grid? Because he just keeps on qualifying ahead of Sir Lewis Hamilton, and by the tiniest of margins, under a tenth, right? Under a tenth. I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what he's doing different to Sir Lewis Hamilton, but that little bit of a gap right there, that's been so consistent from last season and now starting again this season in Bahrain. That's why I say George is the best qualifier. But now you've got the best qualifiers driving the car at 101, 102%, and they're down by 6/10. The car is worse than it looks. The car is worse than it looks, right? It's been nice to consider how good the car could be if they sorted out all their issues and what have you, the porpoising last season. It's been good to consider and think about how good the car might be. But what everyone's forgotten, everyone fell for the fool's gold, even Mercedes, is that these two drivers are making this car look better than it is. They're making this car look way better than it is. And now, 6/10 down, and these guys are driving above the maximum delta of this car. Like I said, 101, 102%. And they're nowhere near. And Mercedes knew, right? Everyone knew after Friday practice, everyone knew that Aston Martin were going to be quicker on race pace, right? Everyone does their long runs on Friday. Aston Martin were saying, Alonso in the Aston Martin. We'll have to see what happens with Stroll when he heals up. But Alonso in the Aston Martin, he was the second fastest car. Well, let me not say second fastest car, there's also Perez, but he was the next best package behind the Red Bulls on race pace, Alonso. And so Mercedes, their last roll off the dice was qualifying. And wow, qualifying was worse than they ever could have imagined. Of course, they're still in the top 10. Right? People are gonna say, "Oh, it's not that bad. They're still in the top 10. They're just like 6th and 7th or whatever." They're right there. They're in the top 8 even. It's Mercedes, guys. Come on now. We're really talking like that? Oh, that's some fuckery, man. That's some fuckery. So the car is worse than it looks. The car is worse than it looks. And it's just landed for Toto Wolff and Mercedes HQ. It's just landed for them. Right? You can't fall for that fool's gold of, oh, well, Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell are making the car do all of that. You can't fall for that fool's gold. Of course they're going to make the car do stunts. Of course. They're some of the best drivers on the grid. One of them might even be the best driver on the grid, and Sir Lewis Hamilton. But they're some of the best drivers on the grid. Of course they're going to make the car do stunts. Alright, so Mercedes here, they've fallen for fool's gold. Next thing Toto Wolff done touched on here. At this team, we blame the problem, not the person. Look, man, I have huge issues with him saying this, because the problem is self-made. The problem is self-made. No one said you had to. Well, Sir Lewis Hamilton will come up and say in budget cap era you can't be changing your concept like that. But Williams did change their concept. Granted, Williams had largest budget last season, and they can probably scrounge up the cash with some sponsorship. They can probably scrounge up the cash with some legacy sponsorships and what have you to actually fill up that budget. Right, they can probably do that, but they still change their concept. It's not like it's impossible to change the concept. Williams were running the zero pods, their own version of the zero pods, and they bailed out. They said, "This thing is way too esoteric for us. We're out of here. This one is not it. This concept is not it." Mercedes didn't do that. Like I said, Mercedes want to be the smartest man them in the room. Like I said in this in my Alonso versus Verstappen teaser, right? Like I said, Mercedes want to be the smartest man in the room. So yeah, they were going to try and make the zero pods work, even if they were a problem. Even if they were a problem. So when Toto says at this team we blame the problem, not the person, who's making the decisions? Because someone made the decision that, okay, we're gonna stick with the zero pod concept, even though it's a problem. Someone made that decision. Is it not Toto? It must be Toto. Toto then says he has responsibilities. Yes, your responsibility is to lead the team. You can't be, you know, if you're Toto Wolff, if you're the team principal of any team, mind you, but let's just keep this to Mercedes. If you're Toto Wolff, you cannot be falling for the fool's gold of, oh, well, the drivers are so brilliant that they'll just make something happen with the car. We just got to get it close enough. You can't be falling for that. That's never worked. Red Bull are not running this, oh, let's get the car close enough and Maximilian Verstappen will do it. They're not running that. They aren't fucking running that. What Red Bull are running is build the best fucking car possible. I don't care what concepts you gotta use on that. Fully traditional, untraditional, mystical, esoteric, exotic, whatever. Throw it on the car. If the data's good, the data's good. We're running that. That's how Red Bull are running this thing. But for Wolff to say at the start, be totally non-dogmatic, that tells me that you've stuck to the zero pods knowing that it's not good. And yes, Toto, you have responsibilities. Your responsibility is to say, this is not the concept, we're changing it. I don't care if we lose this season or what have you, because, you know, you've already got a duff concept coming in. It doesn't matter what happens with the season. It doesn't matter. Right? So if you need to bin the season to come back with a proper concept, you do it. That's your job. That's your job. You're supposed to get the team in line with that, on board with that. That's your job. Otherwise, like you said here, you're going to need to fire yourself if you want to do something. I'm still not sure how to read this. I'm still not sure how to read this quotable that Toto's put here. I need to fire myself up if I want to do something. I think a word has been missed and I think a word has been lost in translation here for him. But anyway. Well, he might actually fire himself at some point, but I don't particularly want that to happen. So what does Toto Wolff ended with? We got it wrong last year. We thought we could fix it by sticking to the concept of car, but it didn't work out. Well, you were being dogmatic. So were you really looking at other concepts? I don't believe so. You just stuck to the concept and said we're making this work because we're Mercedes. And then he continues, so we just need to switch our focus onto what we believe is the right direction. Well, if you stick with the zero pods, then you clearly believe the zero pods are the right direction. But anyway, it's first race of the season, right? Well, let's see what happens. Let's see what a lot of people are going to say, oh, wait and see what happens. Well, we already know the concept is not it. Bahrain, you see, this is the thing with having the test. I said this in the previous video as well. This is the thing with having the testing venue be the first Grand Prix. And that's that there's no mystery. There's no mystery right now going into the season. It's not like testing at Catalonia and then the opening round of the season is at Melbourne. Or even you test at Bahrain and the opening round of the season is Melbourne. It's not like that. It's nothing like that. Because after Melbourne, that would be an outlier of a circuit, and you would probably have, well, this season Aston Martin might do some sort of madness at Melbourne, but it wouldn't be the de facto best car that romps away at Melbourne, right? That wouldn't just happen by script. Right, Melbourne has its own quirks and intricacies that cars need to get around, and for whatever reason, the best car of the season doesn't really do that all that well. It doesn't really get around the intricacies of Melbourne all that well. So, you know, if we started off with testing in Catalonia or Jerez or even Bahrain, and we go to Melbourne, it's a different situation. But now we've done the testing at Bahrain, you've now raced at Bahrain, so you've essentially gotten a double test at Bahrain, and the stopwatch didn't lie the first time. The stopwatch did not lie the first time. And you know, another thing to understand about test venues like your Bahrain, like your Catalonia, like your Jerez, is that they are representative of a large swath of circuits that the F1 circus will be visiting for the season. Right, you test at Paul Ricard. Right, the data that you get there is pliable at some 70% of the circuits on the calendar. Is it panic stations at Mercedes? Well, depends what you think the aims are for Mercedes. But Mercedes are in trouble. Right, why are Mercedes in trouble? Because they've admitted that they now need to redesign their car. Why they couldn't make that admission last season or in the off season, I just will never know. Right, I will simply never know. Someone at Mercedes HQ knows a lot more about why they've made the decisions that they've made, a lot better than I do. Was there some good racing between Sir Lewis Hamilton and Alonso and what have you? Yes, absolutely. right? There's always gonna be good racing, right? You know, Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton, that incident that they had at Belgium last year, like that's not the norm. You're not gonna see, you're not gonna see an Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton colliding often. They're both just too good for that. Right, mind you, George Russell also had some good racing with Alonso and whatever. You're not gonna see these guys colliding all that often. And the beef, right? There's this misconception that Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton have beef. They don't have beef with each other, right? They have history with each other for sure, but they don't have beef. Alonso's beef is primarily with Ron Dennis, believe it or not. Believe it or not, his beef is with Ron Dennis because Ron promised him something that he strictly could not deliver on, and that was him being de facto number one driver at McLaren. Even against the rookie, he couldn't deliver on that. That's not how Ron Dennis runs a team. But he told Alonso that fib, and well, Alonso expected him to stick to it. So Alonso's whole gripe is with Ron Dennis. Sir Lewis Hamilton, a rookie Sir Lewis Hamilton, found himself in the crossfires for all that, essentially. But these two, Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton, they don't have beef with each other. They just have history. That's why you can see them being jovial. I mean, like I said, Belgium Grand Prix observations last year, right? Yeah, all the drivers will get spicy on the road, and Alonso is even like a fiery Spaniard, right? So he's gonna get extra spicy when he when he feels something has not gone correct out on circuit. So he's gonna get extra spicy on the radio. But all the drivers get spicy on the radio when colliding with each other. It's what happens when you're in these F1 cockpits. You're isolated. You get that fighter pilot mentality. That's just how it happens. But these two, they never had beef with each other, just history. So when you see them hugging at the end of the Grand Prix, you know, don't think that, oh, Sir Lewis Hamilton is now turncoating or what have you, or, you know, Sir Lewis Hamilton is just that honorable, like, you don't care if you're I mean, you could run that. Sir Lewis Hamilton is so honorable that he doesn't care if you're his enemy, he's still gonna celebrate you. You could run that. But these two, as far as I know, never had beef like that. They just have history. Anyway, Mercedes are in so much trouble this season. I don't know why they stuck with the zero pods. You know, it was funny. I saw when the car launches were coming out, and you know, social media and the YouTube sphere was F1 metasphere in general was going crazy over the black paint coming back, the black livery coming back, the black arrows coming back. I mean, I was excited at first because I couldn't see the side pods correctly. I thought they'd gone back to a traditional side pod type of spec. So I was like, oh my god, have they done it? And then I got some better pictures and I was like, oh god, they're still running the zero pods. Are they serious? They're still running the zero pods? And at that point, you know, I knew I knew what was up. I decided to wait for testing, wait for the first Grand Prix. Let's just wait and see what happens. And well, what I thought would happen happened. It happens. But anyway, I am really hoping Mercedes turn this shit around somehow, but it's unlikely. This is like a year. This is like a year's worth of actually fixing the problem. Right, instead of trying to make a problem work, this is a year's worth of fixing the problem. They've done a year's worth of trying to make the problem work, right? That was last season. Now this season is going to be a year of actually addressing the problem. Oh man, Mercedes. I don't know how they let themselves get into this situation. People might say, oh, but all their talent has been poached or what have you. I mean, Mercedes let the talent get poached. They let him get poached. You gotta remember that at the end of the day. Mercedes are built to let staffers go because they're gonna have new geniuses in the background coming through. And let me address this whole piercings situation. This whole jewelry / piercing situation with Sir Lewis Hamilton. Let me just address that real quick. The FIA and FOM, they are not going to remove the no piercings rule. They're not going to remove that. Why aren't they going to remove that? Because they want to maintain a certain type of clean image for F1. That's why they will just not remove that rule. And they believe piercings are gaudy, and I believe this as well, but Sir Lewis Hamilton is his own man, he's doing his thing. So they can't remove this rule. They will never remove this rule. But Sir Lewis Hamilton has already won championships, Grand Prix with the piercings all over the gaff and what have you. And if they were actually going to police him, they should have policed him back then. Right? They absolutely should have policed him back then if they were going to police it. The fact that they didn't means that he can keep the piercings, and it's just a formality of get a doctor's note, go to a surgeon or what have you. The surgeon's gonna write up a note. Is it real or not? Who knows? But you know, if I remove these piercings, like the nose piercing or what have you, it could deform his nose for the rest of his life, what have you. And then what are the FIA gonna do? They're gonna claim to be doctors and go against like some doctor's advice. Like, who the fuck are they to do that? Right? They're gonna go get another doctor, another surgeon. The second surgeon's gonna tell them the same thing. So at this point, it's just a formality. This will probably be something that happens every season for the rest of Sir Lewis Hamilton's career, where give us the doctor's note and you're good to go racing. Because they, what are the FIA and FOM going to do against the doctor's note? You can't do anything against that. Jog on. What are the stewards going to do with the doctor's note? They can't do anything against that. Jog on. You can't be trying to dictate your rules if they're going to fuck up someone else's health, right? They just can't do that. But this is just an agreement in the back rooms. Give us the doctor's note, or we step out of your way because you got the doctor's note. It is what it is. Who knows? There might be some crazy teen that comes through in like 2 decades time or whatever, who's got piercings out the wazoo. But he's so good behind the wheel that they can't not put him in the car, right? One of these teams. And they'll get him the doctor's note. It'll all be the same thing. But like, that driver would have to be so like mind-bendingly good that I just don't see it happening. But anyway, Toto gonna find himself in hot water this season. But anyway, let me just wait for the season to happen. Alright, I'm gonna head into the sundry notes now. We're gonna cover the whole grid essentially, but this is just part of the sundry notes. The video is getting pretty long now. I want to kind of wrap things up. So Alfa Tomeo and Bottas are off to their customary quick start. Guenther has not had the same fortune at Bahrain, and well, it's gonna be dangerous for Guenther if he doesn't find some consistency and form in a hurry, right? It's going to be dangerous for him because, well, the likes of Logan, I'll get to Logan Sargent next, or sometime. I'll get to Logan Sargent sometime soon, but with the likes of Logan Sargent coming onto the grid, yeah, time is going to start ticking. Time will start ticking because, well, like I was saying last season, I like Zhou, but he's barely better than baby Schumacher. Barely. Alright, so when Bottas is out here doing a madness at the start of the season, this isn't Zhou's rookie season anymore. This might just be how Zhou is as a driver, in that he starts the season slow and he gets to a roiling boil as the season goes on. That just might be the way he is as a driver. Right. But he will have to actually get to the point of the rolling boil. He will actually have to get to that point. Not enough to say that, oh, he is this type of driver. Now you actually have to be that type of driver, right? So I'm just gonna say that Zhou was off form this weekend. He'll probably come back on form next weekend. Well, hopefully. I mean, I'll say probably, but hopefully. I want Zhou on the grid when we go China. I want to see what the Chinese audience does with the Chinese driver on the grid. But anyway, He'll probably be ushered out of Alfa Romeo when Audi come in full time anyway, but that's for them. Regarding the Alfa Romeo car, I like the livery, but I don't like the shape. Right, there's just something about the shape at the back of the car, where all the exhausts, where all the exhaust manifolds go. There's just something about the shaping at the back there that just doesn't rub me quite right. But anyway, Alfa Romeo demonstrating their Sauber DNA, getting off to a flying start at the start of the season. And this is when they're going to collect the bulk of their points. One would assume that Audi are throwing some expertise at this, because I mean even the media already starting to call them Audi. So one would assume that Audi are throwing their expertise at Alfa Romeo already, and well, we'll see if this early season form is maintained for them, or well, the start of season form is maintained for them. Alpine have mixed fortunes. I mean, Gasly, he's had a pretty solid debut. There's not really much to say about his debut. For Alpine, it's not like he's not for Alpine, I should add. It's not like he's debuting for the first time right now in F1. He's not a full debutant like a Logan Sargent or Piastri, not at all. But he was debuting for a new team. He's had a pretty solid debut. Ocon, by contrast, you see, this is the thing about Ocon. This brother was talking so much jive at the back end of so much jive. Boy, he was getting so fresh with it. He was saying that he was responsible for Alpine's development and all of that. Well, when it's announced midway through the season that Alonso's not going to be at the team anymore, well, of course they're not going to have him do any development. Right, because he's going to then leave with some piece of the intellectual property. And they can't have that. So, yes, Ocon, you did the development at the back end of last season, and that development carries over into the new season, but look at that. Tracy Martin just jumped right in front of you. How did that happen? How did that happen? And, you talk all that jive about who was developing the car. Now the car's fallen back, and you got a whole bevy of penalties. That's a hat trick of penalties. That was insane. First you don't stop correctly in the grid hatching. It's a mistake. It can happen. Then the team fluffed the lines, and they're touching the car before the 5-second penalty is over. It's a double whammy. And then Ocon speeding in the pit lane. It's a triple whammy. You might as well retire the car. There's 3 strikes. Retire the car, and the car got retired. Right, bad day at the office for Ocon, but boy, does it look a hella foolish with all this hot jive. This guy was talking so much Scoville, so many Scoville units at the back end of last season. He was talking all of that. And now this is what happened. I mean, it's probably a better result for Alpine, all things considered, because they didn't have to see what happens when Ocon and Gasly are on the same piece of track. So this might be the better result for Alpine, all things considered. But we'll have to see what happens with Alpine going forward. One thing worth noting with Alpine is that they've done a whole weight-saving campaign on their car. So I am going to say that this car will probably develop pretty well, assuming they're able to keep their weights under control. But seeing as they've done a whole weight-saving program for the off-season, I'm assuming that any upgrades they bring are going to have the minimum weight in mind. Are always going to have the minimum weight in mind. And well, we'll just have to see how Alpine do. But yeah, Ocon, this type of race was coming. It is what it is. He'll bounce back. I have some strong opinions about Ocon, but he'll bounce back. He's a solid enough driver. He's a race winner even, so mind you, but Gasly is also a anyway. Williams are silently moving up on the grid. And they're doing it really silently. They're not making any sort of big noises about it. I mean, Albon's hair is making a whole lot of noise. It's very interesting that he's dyeing his hair all these colors. I got something to say about it, but I don't want to say it just yet. But it's very interesting that he's dyeing his hair all these various colors. Alex Albon. But otherwise, my main points of interest, Albon did score some points, very good race for him. You know, Albon is just Albon. He's pretty solid. I think Albon would be doing the same thing that Sergio Perez is doing at Red Bull, but he wouldn't have the X factor that Sergio Perez has at a Monaco or a Singapore, for instance. That's like where I put Albon right now. And he wouldn't have the tire management that Perez has, but he would be solid enough anyway. Right? I mean, they could run Albon at Red Bull this season because I don't think anyone is near them. But it's neither here nor there. But the thing I want to talk about at Williams is Logan Sargent. This guy looks like a really fascinating and solid talent. He looks really solid, this guy. Right? Every time, well, let me not say every time because I haven't watched a lot of Formula 2 or Formula 3. But for the odd occasion that I did tune in to Formula 2 or Formula 3, right, there's nothing else playing on TV, there's nothing important that I need to get done, and I'm waiting for some sort of F1 to start, be it qualifying or what have you. Yeah, I might watch some F2 or some F3. And any time that, how much have I watched F2, F3? Like 2 or 3 times? Each of those times that I turned on F2 or F3 over the past 2 years, I mean, Logan Sargent was always doing something at the front. He was at the sharp end of the field, always doing something. So there's a talent there. He's very solid. I'm not sure where the questionable reporting came out that the Americans don't really know anything about Logan Sargent. They know all about him. Believe that. Believe that. They know all about. They would have done all the research. They would have been going through the driver rosters for the season and seeing an American flag. Oh my God, he's American. Suddenly they do the deep dive and they'll know all about him. Believe that. Believe that. But Logan Sargent, he's such a fascinating talent for me. I've never seen. Well, I have seen talents that are solid throughout the years watching this F1 thing. But I haven't seen a driver coming out of F2 that looks as solid as Logan Sargent. I have not. So I'm going to be watching him closely. I'm very interested to see how he does. Very interested to see how he does. He's still betting in and he's keeping Alex Albon honest. So I'm quite interested to see how he does. He might even be better than George Russell come the final take of their careers, all things considered. But anyway, let's not get to. George Russell will still be best qualifier on the grid, right? Qualifying is its own metric, but I digress. Haas, I gotta talk about Haas real quick because does Guenther really know best? Who knows? Because they would have gotten the same result with baby Schumacher in the car instead of Hülkenberg. Including the damage bill. Who would have guessed that? They binned baby Schumacher because he's racking up too much damage on the cars. He's too expensive, supposedly. I mean, heck, just let the driver crash. Let me not say that. Can't just let the driver crash. You got budget caps to deal with nowadays. But back in the day, you would just let the driver crash. Like, you would send the driver out to go do some event somewhere for the sponsors, some public relations events, and that would work up some money, and there you go, you paid for your own repairs now. That's not really how it's going to work nowadays. Now you got the budget, and the budget is set, and whatever else you work up on the side is not being added to it. Right, so I can't really say, oh, just let baby Schumacher crash the car, he'll learn, right? But really, you would have gotten the same results with baby Schumacher in the car instead of Hülkenberg. So what exactly was gained by dropping baby Schumacher? Right, my only gripe with Hülkenberg coming back is that he's a known quantity. We've seen this guy. We've seen this guy so many races without a win and what have. We've seen this guy, bro. And he had some good opportunities to win too, multiple ones. We've seen this Donny. He's not it. He's a great driving talent. Let's not take that away from him. But he's just not it. At least Baby Schumacher, you can bank on him getting better. How much better would he get? It's anyone's guess. Well, we'll see how much better he gets while with Mercedes and McLaren, I suppose. But the point here with Haas and for Guenther, the point here is that you would have gotten the same result with Baby Schumacher in the second car. You didn't gain nothing. You even still got a damage bill to deal with because Hülkenberg damaged the front wing. Minor damage, I suppose. But he still damaged the front wing. It had to get replaced in a pit stop. Same bull. Matter of fact, you're now losing sponsor money because you don't have that Baby Schumacher shine, right? So whatever sponsors are attached and married to him, you don't have those. And you still had to pay a damage bill. Come on, man, what did you gain? What did you gain? Maybe you get to hug Hülkenberg now instead of Baby Schumacher. I mean, oh man, it is what it is. I mean, there's not much to really cover on Alfa Tomeo. I mean, their race was pretty much over until that virtual safety car for the close retirement. But otherwise, there's not really all that much to talk about with Alfa Tomeo. All I want to mention is that one, De Vries got left out to dry with the VSC. There wasn't enough time to pit him for fresh tires, but they were able to pit Tsunoda for fresh tires. Two, there's a lot of positive reports coming out about De Vries and his work ethic within the team. A lot of positive reporting in that regard. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him at Red Bull by the start of next season, quite frankly, with the type of chatter that they've been letting loose to the media about him. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. And I want to comment on Wolfpack he might have made a video for all I know, but I ain't watched it. But he made a post when the cars were being launched, when the liveries were being launched, and he said that the Alfa Tauri looked like a Minardi. I just want to point out, right, Alfa Tauri came from Minardi. Do you know why they always have an Italian name? Because they have Minardi DNA. Minardi is an Italian team. They were Italian owned. Minardi, that's an Italian guy. That Donny, he's Italian. Dietrich gave him his money, he gave him the team, and said, cool, I'm off to retire on, a wine farm somewhere in the Italian hills or something. Probably done that. I don't know what Minardi's doing. I don't know what the man Minardi is doing right now. But Alfa Tauri, Toro Rosso, Scuderia Toro Rosso. Why did they stick with all those Italian? Why they're still using the Italian naming convention, right? Why are they doing that? Because they have Minardi DNA. They are very proud of their Minardi heritage. When Sebastian Vettel won his first Grand Prix in Monza, most of that team, 90% of that team, were from the ashes of Minardi. So it's so irresponsible and vapid. It's just vapid to be saying, oh, the car looks like, or the paint job looks like a Minardi. Ha ha ha, big jokey joke. My nigga. That's exactly what they've gone for, my nigga. Yeah, you just told them that, yeah, they hit the design mark perfect. That's all you really told them, dude. Like, there's some irresponsible commentary coming out here and there. I just gotta, get on that. Get on that. You can't be dissing AlphaTauri for looking like a Minardi. They love that. That's the whole aim. That was the whole aim. And now they've won races with that Minardi DNA. Who would have guessed that? It's not just the Sebastian Vettel result. They also got one with Gasly. Same venue. But anyway, man, McLaren have had a nightmare start to their campaign. It's a nightmare start. Alright. A pure Nightmare start. Before I get to that, let me just cover this Baby Schumacher thing. Baby Schumacher has gotten an expansion to his foundation course by now getting a second third driver simulator driver reserve driver role with McLaren. Right, this is an expansion to his foundation course. McLaren are undoubtedly copying some sort of discount on Mercedes power units. They're undoubtedly copying some sort of discounts on their power units by having Baby Schumacher in their program as well. And Baby Schumacher will do the dual programs. Right, he will be doing third driver roles for Mercedes and McLaren. Although McLaren will probably pull up one of their own youngsters and put them in the car for one of the other runs. But anyway, that's not what's important for McLaren. What's important for McLaren is that they've had a nightmare start to their campaign. They've done the same thing that they did last season where they failed to scale up their car properly from the wind tunnel. However they misdesigned their car last season, they've done it again this season. Alright, the parts don't go together like they're supposed to. And to add on to that, they were also struggling massively with reliability and testing. And well, that carried over to the circuit. Piastri had an issue with changing gears. Something about the gear shift was off in that car. They believed changing the steering wheel would fix it, and that actually put the car out the race. It didn't leave the pits after that steering wheel change, so there's that. An unfortunate debut for Piastri, but at least it's out of the way, right? So Brundle did a very fascinating thing with Piastri, in that he didn't go talk to him on the grid walk because he didn't want to put any more pressure on him. I'm not entirely sure where Brundle puts Piastri on the talent totem pole, but he's probably got him very high up there to be doing that for him. Mind you, he didn't do that with Sir Lewis Hamilton when he was debuting. I haven't seen him do that with any other rookies when they're debuting. I might be mistaken on that, but anyway. Right, back to McLaren and their woes. Norris, Lando Norris, Zach Brown is going to have a really difficult time keeping a driver like Lando Norris at McLaren. You're going to have such a difficult time doing that, homeboy. Such a difficult time. Because, well, Audi are coming in a few years' time. Zhou was the guy to fall there. Mind you, Bottas might have called it a day by then, or he'll call it a day 2 seasons into Audi's time in F1. But Audi are coming in. I said this in a previous video, but Norris to Audi, don't be surprised if that happens. Really do not be surprised if that's probably gonna fucking happen at some point. And it's especially more likely to happen when McLaren can't even get the car to run normally for a race. When you always have, I've seen it before on cars, but I've never seen it have to be done that much where the pneumatics have to be topped up so often. I've never seen that. I've seen the pneumatics have to be topped up before on other cars, but not that often. That was like 3 or 4 times over the whole Grand Prix that they pulled him in to gas up the car, which is absurd. I'm surprised Lando didn't bend the car into a wall with his frustration. I'm surprised he didn't speed through the pit lane with his frustration, because Ocon did. With the things that he got frustrated by. So I'm surprised Norris didn't do that either. He didn't fall prey to that. But yeah, that's a nightmare start for McLaren. That's a nightmare start. And they are going to fall for their own fool's gold of, oh well, Norris was matching Mercedes and Ferrari towards the back end of the Grand Prix. Yeah, because he was pitting for tires so much more often than everyone else on account of having to top up the pneumatics of the car. But anyway, Long season ahead for McLaren. There is no storyline. There's no battle of the fates going on at McLaren. They want to keep both of these guys there. But Zach Brown is going to have to prove that his McLaren is a serious project if they're going to keep a driver like Lando Norris there, because he will be fetching interest from the likes of Audi. He's already fetched interest from Dr. Marco, right? We know Dr. Marco is enamored with this guy. But he's going to be fetching interest from Audi when they come in, when they formally come in, and he's probably going to fetch, well, it remains to be seen if Porsche do come in, but whichever team Porsche do attach themselves with, he's also going to fetch interest there. Mind you, Piastri is also going to fetch that same interest at some point, most likely, with the way Brundle was treating him on the grid walk. But anyway, long season ahead for McLaren, long season ahead for a lot of teams here. There's going to be a lot of instances this season where tariff strips get stuck on cars, and a car, no specific car in mind, but a car might have their engine go pop because a tariff strip got stuck in the side pods or what have you. Yeah, when that happens, it's gonna be a whole kerfuffle. I'm sticking to my previous suggestion of, well, make a pouch, maybe even an air pouch, right, located somewhere in the side pod space. Make an air pouch, can have a little door like compartment that's easy open with one hand, or even with a fist, right? The driver's going to be holding a fist of tariff strip, and you fist it open, then you let the tariff strip go into the aero pouch that's there, and all the trash stays on the cars instead of actually, well, going out on circuit and getting onto another car in any sensitive part of the car, of the cars that are out on circuit, of any competitors out on circuit. Mind you, some drivers will even try and toss the tariff strip away from the car, but, well, the aero forces are so much on the car that it's just gonna stick the tariff back onto the car. And, well, that's FOM's problem to solve. Brundle, he's got the same suggestion as me with the pouch, although he's probably thinking of the analog pouch, the traditional pouches, that little cotton pouch somewhere in the cockpit. You throw the tariff strip in there. That would work too. But it's getting to a point where it's a bit silly to be throwing tariff strips out onto the circuit, because at some point it's gonna make someone else's engine go pop. Depends whose engine. If it were Maximilian's engine that went pop because someone threw a tariff strip into his side pods or what have you, onto his radiators, well, they would change the rule. They would change the rule same weekend. That Sunday, they would change the rule, right? But anyway, they got to get on top of this eventually. And to close the video, there were no manufacturing issues for anyone. I said I was going to keep on top of. Is anyone going to have manufacturing issues? Is anyone going to have issues with the power demands that go into manufacturing? Is anyone going to have issues with the resource acquisition, materials acquisition for this season? I've kept on top of this, and, well, no one had issues. No one had issues, which is wild to me. It's just completely wild to me. Because, well, World War III is brewing. NATO and friends are sending tanks, and now sending tanks over to Ukraine. Aside from whatever experimental weaponry they've sent there already, they're now sending over tanks. And those tanks get there in, what, 4 months from now? Something like that. So yeah, this thing is escalating. The world has been locked off from 2/5 of its energy resources because, well, Russia's under sanction. And, well, the circus keeps moving like nothing is affected. The circus will always work just fine. But bloody hell, they're running out of eggs in America. The Germans, the Germans are out of gas and what have you. I don't even want to know what's going on in Germany right now, quite frankly. It's probably not as bad as it was predicted, because it's never as bad as predicted, but, you know, everyone else is having to ration fucking resources, materials and everything, energy, like literally having to ration energy. Not for the big Colosseum, not for the circus, never that. So no one had any manufacturing issues, none at all. No one had issues keeping the lights on, in the fabricators or anything. No such issues. Everyone had all the spares that they, like, come on, bro. Everyone had the spares that they needed. Some man even brought new developmental parts just to trial over the weekend. There were no manufacturing issues for anybody, top to bottom on this grid. And yet World War III is brewing. And yet Russia is sanctioned. And yet the oil prices are a fucking matzah. And yet the recession is beginning. We're in a recession right now. And yet the recession is beginning. All these things are popping off. Don't worry, lads. The circus will move just fine. The circus will always be there to watch over the weekend. Can you believe that? Bloody hell. But anyway, I think that's going to be the vid. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Hell breezy. Let me show you how to keep the dice rolling when you're doing that thing over there. Hey. Let's go! Cause I'm feeling like I'm running and I'm feeling like I gotta get away. Better know that I don't and I won't ever stop. Cause you know I gotta win every day. Go! See, you really wanna pop me. Go! Just know that you will never flop me. And I know that I gotta be a little cocky. Go! You ain't never gonna stop me. Every time I come a nigga gotta set it, then I gotta go and then I gotta get it, then I gotta blow and then I gotta shut it. Any little thing a nigga think that he be doing, cause it doesn't matter, cause I'm gonna dead it. Then I'm gonna murder everything and anything about it. Boom, about a thing. I gotta do a lot of things to make it clearer to a couple niggas that I always win and then I gotta get it again and again and again. And I be doing it to death and now I move a little foul. Nigga better call a rap and everybody know my style. Niggas know that I'm the best when it comes to doing this. And I be banging on my chest and I'm banging in the east and I'm banging in the west. And I can't give you more and I will never give you less. You will hear it in the street and you can read it in the press. Do you really wanna know what's next? Let's go. See the way we on it and we all up in the race. And you know we gotta go now try to keep up with the pace. And we struggling and hustling and set it and get it. And we always gotta do it, take it to another place. Gotta taste it and I gotta grab it and I gotta cut all through this traffic just to be at the top of the dome. But I know I gotta have